This week, you've discovered 5 pieces of his story. A scar that marked his face for life. The first blow that brought him into crime. The day he bought the police. The St. Valentine's Day massacre. And finally, that surreal image of a legendary gangster strumming a banjo behind the walls of Alcatraz. But all these scenes pieced together are only fragments of a larger destiny. So take a moment. Imagine we're sitting, you and I, in a smoky Chicago bar. A glass in front of you, the sound of jazz lingering in the air. And I'll tell you his whole story. Not just the anecdotes, but the full journey from a Brooklyn kid to the fallen king of Chicago. Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born on January 17, 1899 in Brooklyn. His parents, Gabriele and Teresa, came from Naples in southern Italy. He ran a small barber shop. She sewed clothes for the neighbors. Humble immigrants, Catholic, hardworking, who had left their homeland hoping to build a better life in America. Al grew up among 9 siblings, a big, noisy, close-knit household, but settled in a poor neighborhood where violence and misery were part of daily life. Brooklyn at that time was nothing like Manhattan's skyscrapers. It was a maze of narrow streets, overcrowded buildings, smells of coal and sweat. And for kids, the street was already a school, one where fights were as common as games. At school, Capone was not a fool, far from it. He was quick, had a sharp memory, but also an explosive temper, often insolent, sometimes violent. And at 14, after an altercation with a teacher, he was expelled for good. From then on, no more notebooks, no more school benches, only the street, and a series of dead-end jobs. Shoe shiner, salesman, paper cutter, apprentice. Nothing that matched his ambitions, because even then Capone dreamed of something else. He dreamed of a life bigger than his neighborhood. As a teenager, Al Capone didn't hang around libraries, but the streets of Brooklyn. He joined local gangs, quickly learning the language of fists and threats. And very early, he caught the attention of a certain Frankie Yale, a bar owner known throughout the neighborhood. Yale wasn't just a bar owner. He had one foot firmly in organized crime, and he would become a kind of mentor for Capone. Under his orders, young Al discovered the rules of the street. 2 lessons that Yale never stopped repeating. Violence must be quick, clean, without hesitation, and loyalty in this world only lasts as long as it pays. Simple, brutal rules, but they would shape Capone's entire career. But beware. Behind the thug in the making, there was also a young man capable of falling in love. It was at this time that he met Mary, known as May, an Irish Catholic. An unlikely story, an Italian boy with an explosive temper and a gentle girl from a devout family. In 1918, they got married, and just a few days after the ceremony, May gave birth to their son, Albert Francis, whom everyone would call Sonny. Despite the chaos, despite the years of blood and illegal business awaiting him, May and Sonny would always remain his refuge, a fixed point, a home where, for the time of a dinner or a smile, Al Capone became simply a husband and a father. 1919. A new law shakes the entire country: Prohibition. Overnight, producing, selling, or transporting alcohol becomes illegal. For the government, it's a moral victory. They believe they're saving families, cleansing society. But in the streets, it's another story. What was meant to be a virtuous crusade turns into a gigantic black market, more lucrative than all previous traffics. And it's at this moment that a name enters Capone's life: Johnny Torrio. A Chicago mobster already well established who needs strong men at his side. Torrio calls Capone and young Al doesn't hesitate. He leaves Brooklyn, boards a train, and heads for Chicago. When he arrives, the city is another world. Immense, boiling, rotten to the core. Speakeasies number in the hundreds, warehouses overflow with Canadian whiskey, and every neighborhood belongs to a gang. For an ambitious man like Capone, it's both a playground and a battlefield. Under Torrio's wing, he learns quickly, overseeing speakeasies, collecting profits, ensuring security. And above all, one lesson he would remember forever: fear works, but money corrupts even better. Police officers, judges, politicians, everyone has a price. And now, Capone knows the currency that opens every door. In 1925, Johnny Torrio, his mentor, narrowly escaped death during an assassination attempt. Wounded and tired, he understood that his time had passed. So he made a radical decision: to retire from business and hand over the keys of his empire to his young protege. And that's how, not even 30 years old, the kid from Brooklyn became the undisputed master of Chicago. Suddenly, the whole city seemed to belong to him. Warehouses overflowed with Canadian whiskey and bootleg gin. Speakeasies multiplied, livelier and more crowded each night, and every evening the dollars piled up at a crazy pace. But Capone knew that violence alone did not guarantee peace. So he paid everyone off. The police, the judges, certain politicians, all got their share. With stacks of bills, he bought silence, protection, and sometimes even smiles. In the streets, he was now seen in broad daylight. Perfect three-piece suit, predatory smile, a glass of champagne in his hand. For public opinion, he was a prosperous businessman. But everyone knew the truth. Unofficially, he was the king of Chicago. But the more one rules, the more enemies multiply. And on February 14th, 1929, Chicago plunged into horror. That morning, 7 men from Bugs Moran's gang, one of Capone's toughest rivals, gathered in a frozen garage. Suddenly, 2 policemen in uniform entered, followed by accomplices in plain clothes. The men obeyed, allowing themselves to be lined up against the wall. Seconds later, the silence was shattered by a rain of machine gun bullets. When the smoke cleared, the floor was red with blood. Officially, Capone was in Florida that day, but no one was fooled. All of Chicago understood that only he could have ordered such a cold, spectacular massacre. This carnage shocked the whole of America. The press seized on the case, public opinion shifted. The man some still saw as a flamboyant outlaw now became public enemy number 1. So the federal government began the hunt. They wanted Capone, no matter the cost. But how to bring down a man who had bought the police, the judges, and much of local politics? The answer came from an almost trivial detail: his taxes. For Capone lived in luxury, drove Cadillacs, flaunted himself in the finest hotels. But officially, he declared almost nothing to the IRS. No income, no assets, as if the richest man in Chicago didn't earn a dollar. For months, federal investigators hunted for evidence, scribbled notes, speakeasy ledgers, associates' testimonies. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together, and in 1931 they caught him. Not for murder, not for bootlegging, not for the massacre, but for tax fraud. The verdict was final: 11 years in prison, a hammer blow for the man who thought himself untouchable. Capone went through several prisons before ending up at Alcatraz in 1934. There, no more banquets or stacks of bills. The king of Chicago was reduced to a number. Syphilis ate away at him, his mind declined, he lost his memory. In the yard, he was sometimes seen banjo in hand, clumsily strumming a few notes in the inmates' orchestra. A surreal image, the most feared gangster in America reduced to playing music to kill time. He was released in 1939 for medical reasons. He spent his final years in Florida, weakened, sick, forgotten. On January 25, 1947, Al Capone died of a heart attack. He was 48 years old. Here is the story of Al Capone, The son of immigrants, a kid from Brooklyn who took advantage of Prohibition to become the king of Chicago. A man who bought the police, the judges, the politicians. Who amassed millions and ruled over an entire city. But his story is also a lesson. Crime can offer wealth, power, luxury, but it builds nothing. It destroys, it isolates, and it always ends up catching those who give themselves to it. Capone thought he was untouchable, and yet he ended up forgotten, sick, banjo in hand. Proof that even kings of the shadows eventually fall. And if you want me to track down a gangster you have your eye on, write it in the comments and I'll be happy to investigate. See you next week for more Chronicles. This was Detective Amir Sang.
Got shots fired at the police, shooters was the emergency, you out. Got shots fired at the police, shooters was the emergency, you out of the air.